The thing about coming out here to Los Angeles, we get to talk to a lot of the top stars, and a few people couldn't make it out, and our next guest is one of them. Garry Shandling was busy on the set of his own show, The Larry Sanders Show, that's going to be premiering on HBO later this year. So let's just roll this interview, and here's our talk with Garry Shandling. Hi, I'm here with Garry Shandling on the set of his new show, The Larry Sanders Show.
Excellent.
How you doing?
I have the flu today, so if I seem a little more laid back than usual, don't call the hospital.
Now you have
I barely have enough energy as it is, let alone I get the flu. I might,
But you're not sick a lot, although you complain a lot, don't you?
Well, I complained when your show called, and I complained, and that's it, I guess.
Let's talk about a show you never complain about. You're doing your last Carson appearance tonight.
Yes, and I'm actually concerned because I feel like I'm very fluish, and I really don't want to say, Johnny, I'll miss you, because that could happen. So I'm going to try and go home and lay in bed until I feel funny.
How do you feel about, your last appearance with Johnny Carson?
Well, I think when I walk out, it's going to feel incredibly odd. I will miss him. I'll miss the show. I'm going to tell him I'm going to miss the set because I'm going to say I assume that you're going to be taking it down and setting it up at your house because it's easier to talk to people that way. So it leaves me really with a void. I mean, that was what I always wanted to do, was be there, and always worked on my Tonight Show shots like a lot of other comedians, so I'll miss it.
And not only worked on it as a comedian, but guest hosted.
Yeah.
The Tonight Show. What was that like?
Really fun and exceptionally grueling. I found it, I don't know how on a daily basis a person can just have that kind of consistency like Johnny has. I would guest host for a week at a stretch, and I swear by Friday night I was just completely wasted because of the pressure of coming up with the monologues and getting in at noon and looking at all the notes and getting everything right. Very stressful, I found. I read the interviews with Jay where he says it's an easy job, and I marvel at that. Someone is doing something wrong, either him or me, because I found it stressful, and it probably reflects our personality differences.
Let's talk about the Larry Sanders Show. We're here on the set. Beautiful.
Actually, I had an idea about 5 years ago to do a show about a guy who hosts a late-night show. I always thought that would be fun to do because I find the personality of these guys really fascinating. I mean, it's like you have to figure, this is how I think of it, the only thing worse than being on TV every night is wanting to be on TV every night. So these guys are sitting there saying, you know what I'd like to do for a living? I want to be on TV every night. And so it would be interesting to explore that kind of personality and explore the hypocrisy of what we see on the talk show set versus what really happens backstage. And that's what this show is going to do. We shot the first one just yesterday, and I think it's terrific. Rip Torn plays the producer, and it's really very effective.
Let's back up a little bit. I was reading where when you first were getting into comedy, were writing stuff, you showed some jokes to George Carlin.
Yeah, Carlin was an incredible influence when I was growing up, and then we had no comedy clubs. I lived in Tucson, Arizona, and comedy clubs hadn't even started up yet. So he was at a nightclub in Phoenix, which is about a 2-hour drive, and I drove up. And
how did you get to meet George
Well,
Carlin?
I was very nervous. He was hanging out by the bar before the show, just sipping some water, I think. And I said, Mr. Carlin, I'm a big fan. I wrote a couple of routines for you, which I had written while I was in college in accounting class, and that's what I did. And I said, would you mind reading them? And he said, I would be happy to read them. I write all my own material, but I'll tell you what I think of them if you like. And I said, that would be great. He said, come back tomorrow night. He didn't know that I'd driven 2 hours to get there. So I said, fine. Drove back to Tucson 2 hours, drove back up to Phoenix the next night. He said, come on in my dressing room. And he sat down like this greatest guy in the world with the material and said, hey, there's some good stuff here. He said, you're very green. I was 19 years old, and it was my first crack at it. And he said, I think you should pursue this. I bumped into him years later, and he doesn't remember the incident because it's probably a kid in every city that comes up to him and says, Mr. Carlin, would you read my stuff? And
has that happened to you? Has a kid come up to you at a club and said, Mr. Shandling?
Yes, Mr. Shandling, would you read this? And I say, here's George Carlin's address. Please. Send it to him.
Now, the Garry Shandling show, very successful. You kind of played yourself, or did play yourself in the show.
I played some caricature of myself.
What about Larry Sanders? How is that different from you? How's it different?
Well, I mean, Larry is a guy, first of all, who's been married 3 times, and I've never been married. He's a guy who makes commitments a little too quickly, and he's currently married. And he flies off the handle a little easier than I do. And he's a little more driven, I think, than I am, much like a lot of hosts are really calculated and really want it, you know. I mean, you got to really want it and to keep that spot on a nightly talk show. You got to really want something, either the fame, either the recognition, which is the fame, either the love that you feel from the audience, but there's something that you need to have to go out there every night. And Larry is really driven by all of that. And I think I'm far less driven by that. I turned down a lot of stuff, and in fact turned down a regular talk show because I just didn't think it was in my blood to do that every night.
Do you think this, with all the talk shows that are on television now, this is the only way to do it like a parody of a talk show?
Well, I don't think this is... No, there's another way to do it, which we won't discuss now. There's another way to do it. Yeah.
Why not?
I think there's... We'll give somebody the idea. I'll turn on NBC and see you in a late-night spot doing my idea.
Well...
Here's what will be my first tip. You get more members in the audience. So, you know, and this is not intended to be a parody, interestingly. I know we dropped that word in. While it's mostly just a compilation of... It's more satirical. And the reason I like it is I can interview people. We're going to interview real guests. And then backstage, there's going to be some difficult acting work, because you see the guy who just walk off stage saying, you know, we're not having Donna Mills on again. And that's what really happens, you know. They go, oh, come back, we got to see you again sometime. And the second the guy's off, they're going, I don't want to ever see that person.
Did that happen
really
on the Tonight Show when you were hosting, where you would have a guest on, you thought it was going to go great, and you got off, and you said, boy, I never want to see that person?
Well, I'm not going to say names now, because I'm going to say that for my show. But there was a person who came on, a woman, an actress, who the interview went horribly, and I had the list of questions, and she did the worst thing. I would ask her the questions that she had approved. We also show that process in this show, that pre-interview, which people
that we didn't have, by the way, for this interview.
You did not, and you can tell.
Okay.
No, you know, I'm,
yeah.
So,
yeah, all right.
I'm here, which says all we need to know.
That's right.
So, she came out, and I had the pre-interview, and I had her list of questions that she wanted to talk about, and it was about some videos she had done and some projects and her relationship. And I said, so tell me about that relationship. She goes, well, I really don't want to. Well, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, that's no problem. So then I went on to the next thing and the next thing, and then the next thing was, I understand you did was an exercise video or something. And she said, why do you keep wanting to talk about my relationship? And why do you? And I said, because it is on the list. And it was really bizarre. And we went back, when I went backstage, we said, I said, was that me? Because I got actually angry in the interview.
Yeah.
They said, no. And a year later, they said, well, let's try her again. And exactly the same thing happened. And it was really, really a bad guest.
We're running out of time here. We're doing Comic Relief together, May 16th. And the president is in town recently. And you know the president.
Well, I know him well enough to know how I'm going to vote.
Any special material you're preparing for Comic Relief because of the recent riots?
Well, I haven't decided what I'm going to do on Comic Relief. It's still a few days away, right?
Right. No.
So let's see if you know, LA is still functioning, and if it is, then I'll write some material about the. I'm thinking of saying to Johnny, you know, I guess people around the country know that this rioting has been going on since Johnny announced his retirement. And that's the basic cause of the whole thing. Johnny, if you had stayed, everything would be calm. But I think it'll go over like it is right now, so
okay,
I won't do it. You know, yeah, I think of this as just a trial ground for a lot of my material.
Well, listen, Garry, we're out of time. We thank you, the very foolish Garry Shandling.
Yes, I'll be fine. I would recommend washing your hands, though, so you don't get my germs.
Okay, I'll try.
Excellent.
My hands are unwashed since that interview. Now, coming up...